Hello bookworms! Today I'm going to be sharing my January wrap up with you. I'm sorry that my videos have been kind of sporadic lately. I just have not felt motivated to film at all, and I was like, you know what? It's much better to just fill my time with the things that I feel like doing instead of forcing it. I think I got really burnt out toward the end of last year because we just had the holidays is always just a crazy time. But it's President's Day weekend. We finally have a nice long break here, and it snowed today, so I don't feel guilty about not doing anything else. So I thought, what better way to kick off my weekend than by talking about some books that I read in January. I actually had a really great reading month. It was very different than I expected, but I just kind of mood read and went with my heart. Usually I wrap books up in the order that I read them during the month, but I decided I'm going to try to do it a little differently this year and see how that goes. So I'm actually going to group books into genres. So that way if there's a particular genre that you're maybe not interested in, you can kind of skip around using the timestamps below. So I'm going to kick things off by talking about all of the fantasy books that I read this month, because fantasy's the best. So first up, I read Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree. This is the prequel novel that takes place before Legends and Lattes. It's set within the same world, and we're following Viv, who is an orc barbarian, and she is the main character in Legends and Lattes. So in that story, she goes and opens up her coffee shop, and in this one, she is still an adventurer, but she gets an injury while her and her party is hunting this necromancer. So she's forced to spend time in this sleepy, cozy seaside town called Merk. That's where they've left her so that she can heal up and get ready to rejoin them. And she ends up being really bitter about it in the beginning, but then making some connections with different characters within the town, and she discovers a love of reading, and it's just so cute. It really lays the seeds for Viv's decision to leave adventuring in the first book. Despite this being a prequel, I definitely would not read it first, especially because there's an epilogue at the end that will spoil book one. So I think this one is more impactful if you read Legends and Lattes first. I personally did not like this one as much as I liked Legends and Lattes. I just thought that one was so much fun, so cute, so cozy. This one did have those same elements, but I think it's just that I liked the characters better in Legends and Lattes, so that one ended up working better for me. It, to me, kind of felt like a similar-ish kind of story. We were also following a character that owns a bookshop, and Viv was helping her to revamp the shop. So it was really in my opinion, kind of the same thing. However, I would still be excited to read anything set within this world. I think that once it expands more, and especially if we get to follow some different characters outside of Viv, because I do feel like her story is kind of wrapped up, I think that would really pull me back in. Next up, I read Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross, and this is the concluding novel to the Letters of Enchantment duology. You guys probably will remember, but I fell completely in love with Divine Rivals last year. I absolutely loved it. It was a 5-star read for me. So I was so eager to pick up Ruthless Vows the day that it came out. I literally went to Barnes & Noble. I was the first one there, and they did not have the Barnes & Noble exclusive copy out, and I had to ask them hey, I looked online before I came and it said that you guys would have this, and they were like, oh my god, we thought that all of these boxes would just be the same book, because they had the white version out, so that then they ended up making a whole table. So you're welcome to anyone else who goes to that Barnes & Noble. But anyway, so I drove, I picked it up, which that's the only bookstore that I've gone to this year, was literally for this book. So I started reading it right away, and while I did really like it, I do think that it was a really solid conclusion. It was missing a little bit of the magic from the first book for me, and I think part of that is because the characters were separated for so long. Obviously, I don't want to spoil anything about the first book, but if you remember the way that it was left off, there's a reason why they're not really together, and why it's harder for them to be together in this book. I would have liked to have seen more scenes between them. I really liked how the story with the gods played out, and how we did get to go more into depth with that and learn more about what was going on their story. It still did have the subtle hints of magic that I liked from the first book. I still really enjoyed the writing, but for whatever reason, it just didn't captivate me as much as the first book did. So again, still really loved it, but it just wasn't that 5-star feeling for me. This one I ended up giving 4 stars. Okay, and then this is where we get into some rereads. So I'm holding up A Court of Thorns and Roses, but for this time around, I really wanted to reread everything before the new Crescent City book came out, and I've reread all of Throne of Glass in 2023, like finished up Kingdom of Ash in December, and then immediately moved into the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. So this time around, instead of reading them physically or on ebook, I decided to listen to the graphic audio versions, and it's interesting. Like, I'm still trying to debate how to count them because they actually like break them up into parts. So technically I listened to part 2 of ACOTAR in January, and it is the length of a book. Like, they do separate it, but it's kind of fun because you get like a full cast that's doing all of the voices. There are sound effects, like you hear people when they're like running in the woods, like you hear them like running, or hear like some of the things that they hear about them. But then it is also a little bit awkward because these books can be a little bit steamy. So then listening to those scenes, I'm always like, this is just like, I feel like I'm gonna start laughing. So I really am glad that I did reread these though. So again, I'm holding up A Court of Thorns and Roses, but I reread A Court of Thorns and Roses Part 2 all on graphic audio. I listened to Part 1 of A Court of Mist and Fury, Part 2 of A Court of Mist and Fury, Part 1 of A Court of Wings and Ruin, Part 2 of A Court of Wings and Ruin, Part 3 of A Court of Wings and Ruin. That one's broken into 3 books, and then A Court of Frost and Starlight, and I'm actually still in the middle of A Court of Silver Flames, but I'm almost done. So re-listened to basically the entire series in January. Really enjoyed it. It was fun to revisit these characters. It had been so long since I reread them. I've reread Throne of Glass like so many times, and Throne of Glass is definitely still my favorite of the 3 series. I had never reread A Court of Wings and Ruin. That was my first time rereading that one, so that was a fun experience. And then I also have a friend who was just reading ACOTAR, the entire series, for the first time. She also read all of them in January, so it was really fun to go back and forth with her, to listen to her theories, and to have everything completely fresh in my mind, so that when she would tell me what she was thinking, I could respond in a way where I wouldn't be spoiling anything, and also know exactly what she was talking about. So it was a lot of fun. It was a really great experience. And I thought, again, I really liked the graphic audio versions. I thought they were really fun. I'm definitely going to purchase the Crescent City graphic audio versions when they come out as well, though those ones will probably be even more awkward, especially book 3 and book 2. But yeah, I think just a fun time. And then I reread House of Earth and Blood, but this one I reread on ebook because the graphic audios are actually not out yet. I think that they're coming out at the end of February, so they might be out by the time this video comes up, but they weren't out when I was reading them. This is the first book in the Crescent City series. Personally, I find Crescent City to be the hardest of Sarah's series to get into. The first book, it really isn't until like the last, I want to say like 250-ish pages that I'm like really excited to read it and to find out what's happening, which is also weird because I do like Bryce very much as a character. I don't really care for Hunt that much. I also had forgotten a bunch of what happened in here, so that was good. It almost felt like I was reading like a new book at certain parts. Obviously, other things I remembered. So again, this one to me is just not as gripping as Sarah's other books, but I still did really enjoy it. It's kind of like having to pick the worst book out of a bunch of really great books. Like, all of them are really great. So despite not being as into it, it still is like a 5-star read for me. And then I did read House of Sky and Breath for the first time, and I read House of Flame and Shadow, but those were my first 2 reads in February, so you'll hear about them in my next wrap up. Then moving on, I read one nonfiction book in January, and this one I listened to on audio with Andrew. We listened to it when we were doing our yearly New Year's Eve 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. It was so much fun. It's called When I Was Your Age by Kenan Thompson. I feel like we both kind of like basically grew up watching Kenan because both of us really loved all that when we were younger. And then we saw him do Kenan and Kel and Good Burger and all of that. And then we've been watching Kenan on SNL since he's joined the SNL cast. So he's like just such like a permanent fixture within my life, I feel like. So it was really fun to listen to his experiences. He talked very much in depth about his time on all that, about his time on SNL, about his relationship with Kel, how they kind of like had a falling out. He didn't go into details because he, didn't really want to like reveal private information, but he did talk about like the time when they weren't communicating and like how it was sad for their families, but then they ultimately did come back around to being in each other's lives again, which is pretty nice. Keenan and Kel also had auditioned for SNL at the same time, and Keenan was chosen and Kel was not. So that probably also, like, at that point they already weren't talking as much, but I'm sure that also like caused a deeper rift. But in true Keenan fashion, the book was so funny and his delivery is just so good. So if you are interested at all, I would highly recommend listening to this one because no one could tell his story better than he can himself. So funny. And he also said, like, for SNL, like on different sketches, there's now like when people are writing scripts, they literally will just write like Keenan reacts because his reactions are so funny. So they don't even have to like write down like what they want to happen. They're just like, he'll just like do his thing and then everyone will laugh. So both of us really enjoyed the book. Then I read 2 thrillers. So I read The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes and I read Killer Instinct by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Both of these are in the same series, which is the Naturals series. This is a YA thriller series and I've always really liked Jennifer Lynn Barnes's books. So I had been meaning to read these for so long, but they actually came out with like new covers and new cute little box sets. So I bought that toward the latter half of 2023 with the intention of reading them this year, and I'm already halfway into the series, so that's good. You definitely have to suspend a little bit of disbelief for these because we are following a girl named Cassie who is expert at profiling people, and she gets recruited to work for this FBI agency that like is off the books and doesn't really exist. Like most people don't know that they have these kids that are working on cases, but the thing is like they don't want them actively in danger, obviously, because they are children. They have them working on cold cases to see if they can solve any of those. There are 4 main people in the program besides Cassie, and it's like about her integrating in with them and how like the dynamic changes once she gets there. And then there is a case that does heavily involve Cassie, so she does get pulled into it. It was fun. I just thought it was like a really fun book, and I obviously enjoyed it enough that I picked up the second one. And I think that I liked the second one even more. This one pulled in one of the other kids into the case, but obviously everyone else is like working on it too because they've all become close and friendly. And yeah, I'm excited to keep going with these. They were a really good time. They're also such quick reads. Like I think I read both of them in like a day or 2. And now I'm just waiting for my library hold to come in on the third one so I could read it digitally. Moving on to romance. I read Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. And this is the first book in the Maple Hills series. I really loved this one. It is a hockey romance, which I had never read before. It's something new to me. We are following Anastasia, who is an ice skater. They call her Stassi. And we're also following Nate, who is the captain of the ice hockey team. So there's like an incident that happens at the beginning where one of the school's ice skating rinks is ruined. So now Stassi and her skating partner Aaron, who are training to be in the Olympics, have to share the ice with the hockey team, and the initial damage was done as a result of someone on the hockey team getting in over his head. So she immediately hates Nate, who's the captain, because she's like, this is all of his fault that this is happening to us. But obviously there ends up being a spark there between the two of them. And some things that I really, really enjoyed about this novel is that it's dual perspective. So we get both the male and female characters' POVs. This one is also very steamy. There's also like so much depth to the characters, and it really captured like the feeling of being in college, and I just absolutely loved the friend group. I'm so excited to continue reading. The next book, Wildfire, is another one that I have on hold so I can read digitally, and the final one comes out in June. I'll definitely be reading all of them because I just really fell in love with these characters and like I need to know everything about their lives. I would even go so far as to say that this is one of the better romances that I've ever read, and it was completely unexpected. I thought like this will just be like a mindless kind of palate cleanser kind of book, but totally took me by surprise and I just adored it. And then I read a YA romance, which is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. I've heard so many people just like sing Lynn Painter's praises, and I was curious to check her out. I think that I'll probably like her adult romance better than her YA romance. I just find YA to be kind of like just so far from where I am in life that it can be a little bit tough to relate to. However, I did really enjoy this one. The main character has lost her mom, so she did have like a lot of inner monologue that did speak to me, and I obviously felt really bad for her. So there were a lot of things with her story that like hit me very hard. She is someone that is just like obsessed with rom-coms, and there's a boy that like she used to know that moved back to their town, and she's determined to get him to ask her to prom and to go out with him and stuff. So her next door neighbor helps her with the caveat that she will allow him to have their parking space that they fight over all the time. But obviously, in typical rom-com fashion, the neighbor and her start like fake dating, and then they end up really liking each other and drama ensues. So it was a really fun time. There's a ton of references to rom-coms in here, so if you like watching rom-coms, I think that you'll enjoy it just for that alone. Like, it was just like a treasure trove of pop culture references. There are obviously like some frustrating miscommunication pieces because it's a YA romance, but it was very cute, very fun, and I read it very quickly. Then moving on to a new section, I'm going to talk about manga that I read. So I fell completely in love with this manga series this month, and that is My Happy Marriage. And I read all 4 volumes that are currently available. Andrew and I also watched the anime, but that'll be in my February wrap up. And these were just so much fun. It's a slow burn, Cinderella inspired fantasy romance. It has a paranormal twist, and it takes place in the Taisho era of Japan. So it was just so good. Like, it just immediately pulled me in. I really liked it. I loved our main character. She had such a difficult life, and then she ends up being given away by her father to get married to this lord. He really like brings her back to life, basically. Like, she discovers that she like is a person of value and like starts being able to find happiness again, and it's just so good. So cute. Also, I was just in love with the art in these. They were really, really beautiful. Highly recommend the series, and the second that volume 5 comes out, I will buy it. There are actually light novels of these, and I'm tempted to pick those up too because I just love the series so much. Then I read The Savior's Book Cafe Story in Another World. I read the first volume of this. I actually read the first volume of this and My Happy Marriage so that I could decide like which series I wanted to read. I ended up loving both of them, so you'll hear more about this series in my February wrap up because I read the rest of the books. But basically, this one is about a girl. It's like an isekai. So she gets chosen to be a savior in this historical kingdom. She gets transported there instead of being like a super powerful being who is fighting all of these beasts that are supposed to come and like put the kingdom in danger. She decides to open up a cozy little bookshop, and she practices more like subtle magic. So she creates like food with like healing magic in it, and she ends up getting this one customer who is like the captain of the knights, and they form a really cute relationship. Struggling to remember what note this one ends on, so I'll just stop there because I don't want to spoil more of the story, but I really enjoyed this one too. This is a really fun like cozy fantasy, and I definitely recommend it. And it's also a finished series. There are only 5 volumes, so it's really easy to just binge the entire thing, and it's a completed story. Then moving on to TV and movies. So the first TV thing that completed in January was the first season of Percy Jackson on Disney Plus, and I really enjoyed it, like way more than I thought that I was going to. I'm also really glad that I reread all of the Percy Jackson books last year, so it was kind of fresh in my mind. I did have some issues with it. I don't think that the show is perfect. I did really like all of the casting. I think that they cast some of the characters like so perfectly, and there were really fun cameos from like very big actors. Some of the things that I didn't like about it is that I do feel like there was a lot of like telling versus showing, and there was a lot less of the kids like making the kind of mistakes that they make in the books. Seemed like they were very like smart about what they were doing, which obviously Annabelle is super smart, so that's believable, but they are still kids and they're going up against gods that have been around for like ever. So I feel like they should have failed in a couple of places more than they actually did, if that makes sense. But it didn't hinder my enjoyment. Like, I did still really enjoy it. I really liked the story arc. I do feel like the ending wrapped up more quickly than I expected it to. Like, when we got to I think it was 8 episodes, and when we got to the 7th episode, I was like, how is the entire rest of the book going to be in episode 8? But I do think that they pulled it off. It also got renewed for season 2, so I'm very excited to watch more of it once it comes out. However, I'm devastated that Zeus, the actor who played Zeus, Lance Reddick, who is just like, oh, so good. Like, they're not going to find anyone else with that voice, so I don't know how that's going to work. We'll see how that goes. Andrew and I also watched season 1 of The X-Files. We decided that we're going to go back and rewatch the entire series. I will say that I'm like struggling with it a little bit. I really like the episodes that are about aliens, but then there are some like filler episodes that I just am like, this is like not great. Since we started watching it, we're almost done with season 2 now. I just have never been like, oh my God, I'm so excited to watch X-Files. So that's unfortunate. We're also kind of debating if maybe we could just look up like best episodes that you should watch and like do that, or like the best seasons. It's okay. Then 2 movies. So I saw the new Mean Girls, the 2024 Mean Girls, and I thought that was very okay as well. I didn't love it. I thought it was weird that they didn't market it as a musical because it was based on the Broadway musical, but they just kind of made it look like it was going to be an adaptation of Mean Girls, the movie, and it wasn't. There were also some weird changes that were made, like Katie didn't have a dad in the movie. I thought that the girl who played Karen was a great actress. Like, she did such a great job playing the role, but they just made Karen so dumb that it was like, there's no one that could exist that knows as little as this person knows. It was like too much. My one big thing is that I didn't like Renee Rapp as Regina George. Don't think that she was convincing. It was like an edgier kind of Regina, and I love the Rachel McAdams Regina so much better. I thought that she was more effective with like being mean, though then there was some added scenes like toward the end of the movie that were really good and I think totally added to the story, so I did like that, like the conversation in the bathroom between Katie and Regina. That was excellent. Just overall, like, didn't love it. And then Katie too. I don't feel like Katie was believable as a mean girl, like, at all. I think that Lindsay Lohan did such a better job of being a mean girl. Like, this Katie just was like a sweet cinnamon roll, like did not have that mean bone in her body. And then again, to point out something that I loved, the actor who played Damien was incredible. He was probably the best part of this entire movie, but it was weird. It was like almost like the Twilight Zone because there were some actors that reprised their original roles. There were word for word, like exactly the same lines, and it almost felt like being in like the Twilight Zone. I did like that they paid homage to the original with having like some of the same outfits. It was just like a little bit weird. It wasn't for me. I liked the Broadway musical a lot and I loved the movie, but the original movie. But this new film just didn't do it for me. And then last movie on my list is Saltburn. I did not like this. I think there were a couple of things that I did like. Like, I liked that it started with like a dark academia vibe. They're at a college and this guy invites this other guy to come back with him to Saltburn, which is his family's like sprawling, beautiful manor. This new guy like worms his way into the family and it's like just really gross. The thing that I did like is that Rosamund Pike and the guy who played her husband were so good. Like, their acting was amazing and Rosamund Pike was hilarious. But outside of that, there was like not much that I enjoyed about this movie. There were a lot of scenes that I just thought were really like gross and disturbing and that like I just didn't need to see. I'm sure that you've heard plenty of things already online about it, particularly without spoiling anything. I'm just gonna say the grave scene. Like, Andrew and I were both watching that and we were both like, no, like, don't, we know what you're gonna do. Don't do it. Don't do it. And then he did it. It was just unsettling and uncomfortable and gross, and I did not like it. And then my last category is games. So I got completely addicted to the game Hades. It is like my new favorite thing ever, and I'm obsessed. Like, I would play it again a million times. This game just worked for me so well because I'm such a lover of Greek mythology. So to see these like Greek gods come to life within the game was so much fun. Normally, I'm the kind of gamer that just likes to like either collect things or beat things up, and I'm not as invested in the story. Like I'm usually like clicking through dialogue pretty quick because I just want to like move on to the next thing. But in this game, I was like hanging on every word. I just loved like the progression of the story. It's a roguelike game. So every time that you die, you actually go back to the beginning and you have to start from the beginning and try to work your way out. The premise of the game is that you are Zagreus, who is Hades' son, and you're trying to escape the underworld and get to the surface, faced with many challenges along the way. And Achilles is kind of like your tutor. It's just so fun. And so knowing Greek mythology, there were a lot of things that did not come as a surprise to me and like depicted differently early on. And I would be like, that's incorrect. And Andrew would be like, because he already played the game, so he already knew too. But I just had such a blast with it. I think the character graphics and everything are just stunningly done. Like all of the landscapes and everything. I loved the gameplay. I really liked getting to like beat everything up. You go, as you're trying to escape, you get like boons from different gods. You get to choose like one of 3 things. And then you have to use that to ultimately like try to get out while your dad is actively trying to keep you in the underworld. Total blast. Really, really love this game. Cannot recommend enough. Amazing. 100% chef's kiss. Perfection. And then the last game that we played is called Ren Fair Regicide. So our friends that we have like monthly board games with subscribe to this monthly board game subscription called, I think it's called Hunt Killer. So every month they get a new box in the mail, and sometimes they'll have like seasons. So there are sometimes that there are like standalone games, and then other times where like a couple of months will be one game. So we're technically in the middle of this one. We haven't actually solved the crime just yet, but it's so much fun. So the premise is that there is a Ren Fair that happened and the owner of the Ren Fair was murdered, and they send you like maps and like letters and all of this different stuff, like all this different evidence that you have to piece together. I think there was a ring in this one. And then there's also links that are to like actual websites. So we got to like watch interviews with some of the suspects and see different photos like from the Ren Fair and just like all of that kind of stuff. So it's really fun. Like it's very engaging, and there's always like some kind of code that you have to break. I tend to usually be like the code breaker for the team. I think I did it for this one and I did it for the last one that we did, but it's so much fun. So I think the first box was we created a suspect list of everyone who could potentially be the murderer. And then from the second box, we had to eliminate one of those suspects. And I'm really excited to do the next one and to find out like who is the guilty party, but it was so much fun. We always just have like a blast doing these together. It's a lot of fun to like have the physical evidence too. I'm not sure if it's something that you can like join late. It's not the only box of theirs that we've done, and the other games have been fun too. So if that's something that you like solving a murder mystery, it's a fun way to kill a day. So that is everything for my January wrap up. I thought that this was actually going to be pretty short since I had so many rereads, but it feels lengthy. So we'll see how this goes while I'm editing, but let me know if you read or watched or played anything that I mentioned, and I will talk to you guys soon in a new video. Bye!